Hi guys, this is Daniel Alexander Cannon here on Logic Before Authority. I'm going to show you something today that you're going to deny. Well, maybe not all of you, but some of you will. I'm going to show you enough evidence that should show you that we'll just use the word elites, okay? The ones that are in power, they have the ability to create earthquakes, and they're doing it. Like the one in California, the one in Canada, the one in Indonesia. Now, why would I say something crazy like that unless I had some pretty good reasoning to back it up? So I'm going to show you some things, and then you're going to still be like, he's got to be crazy. They can't have the ability to do this. And then I'm going to, after you've still questioned it, I'm going to prove it to you again. And then when you still not sure, I'm going to prove it so well that by the time this video is over with, you're going to know what I know. So, and then I've got a couple other things to show you after that are tied to it. So let's get to it. Let's take a look. Now, I'm going to come back to this image. This was the image that was put out, one of them about the Indonesian earthquake that happened a few days ago. Okay, and what I particularly want to point out, and I'll come back to it, is the image or the icon that they chose to use as the marker for the earthquake. But I'll come back to that. So now, why am I saying these strange and weird things? Well, let's take a look. Okay. First thing that I noticed odd, which this isn't the proof, but I noticed odd, was how long the earthquake was that was in California. Not just that one, some of these other earthquakes have lasted, instead of 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, there was shaking going on, according to the seismographs, for up to an hour. The ground was shaking for up to an hour. But that's no evidence. Or is it? Now let's look at something. I want to show you a couple of things. Okay? All right. Okay. Now, we'll just look at this one first. This was the 6.8 in Indonesia. Okay? Now, this was on Sunday, the 7th, at 15:08. And that was 13:08 Eastern Standard Time. You can see this on the right-hand side of the screen. At a depth of 6.2 miles. Now, I want you to remember that. Let's look at something else. Let's see, what is this one here? Yeah. This was the Indonesian one, okay? Notice it says 10 kilometers. I recalculated and said it's a depth of 10 kilometers, which is 6.2 miles. 10 kilometers, 6.2 miles. Now let's look at the one that was in California. Okay, this was on July the 4th. And it was at 13:33 Eastern Time. And third line down, it had a depth of 6.2 miles. Wait a minute. Didn't the one in Indonesia have a depth of 6.2 miles? Well, that must be a coincidence. Strange coincidence, but a coincidence, right? So 6.2 miles is about 32,000 feet. So let's look at this one. This one just popped off in the last 24 hours in Iran. You see, in Iran, they're having a earthquake swarm right now, and this one happened at 3 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Okay, and it had a depth of, well, what do you know? Now that is strange. 6.2 miles. Another earthquake at 6.2 miles. That make you start to wonder why. Why is that? 6.2 miles. See, here's the earthquake swarm that's going on in Iran. You see? Now, if somebody had the ability to create earthquakes and they had this power to do this, and I would suspect that they would use it to threaten people. And, well, they just happen to have an earthquake swarm going on in California too, but in Iran. Now, here was another one. This one was the first one that happened on the 4th of July, the first big one, and it happened just up across the border in Canada, above Seattle. And this was a 6.2. That's kind of like the 6.2 miles, 6.2. And then the depth of this one, how deep was this? What does it say? Oh, 6.2 miles. Really? Do you smell a rat yet? Huh? 6.2 earthquake? 6.2 miles deep. Huh. Okay, well, here's one at the Carlsberg Ridge. Okay. And this happened on July the 2nd. And it happens to be at 6.2 miles deep as well. Here's one south of Australia, this one, on the 2nd as well. And it has a depth of, what do you know, 6.2 miles again. This must be a magic number, 6.2 miles. So I've shown you there that there's obviously something up, because earthquakes happen anywhere from ground or sea level, I guess you'd say, all the way down to hundreds of miles. But all of a sudden, almost all the earthquakes are happening at 6.2. Well, not all of them. I mean, I've only shown you just all the major ones lately. But let's look and see if there's any more to further substantiate, my story. Well, let's see. 2 days and 6 days ago, one in Russia and one in the Solomon Islands, both at 6.2 miles. Here's one at the Western Indian Antarctic Ridge and one in China, both at 6.2 miles. Here's one in Japan and in Indonesia, both at 6.2 miles. These are on the 8th, like today. Here's one on the 6th and one on the 7th in Indonesia and in New Zealand. Both of them as well, 6.2 miles. Maybe their top rider is stuck at the USGS. Here's two more, both at 6.2 miles, Fiji and Russia. Here's two more, both at 6.2 miles, Fiji and the Loyalty Islands. Here's two more, both at 6.2 miles, Tonga and southern Sumatra, Indonesia. Here's another China one and another Indonesia one, both at 6.2 miles. Here's another one in Russia, and here's Canada again, 6.2 miles. Here's Indonesia and Indonesia, two different locations, 6.2 miles. Here's Indonesia and Portugal, 6.2 miles. Here's Russia and Russia, both at 6.2 miles. Here's Costa Rica and the northern mid-Atlantic ridge, both. You said it. I didn't have to. So what's going on here? Well, what's going on here is that the ones that created CERN, and it's behind the military-industrial complex in the United States, and not just the United States, Britain, Israel, France, all these countries that are, running the world. They've perfected, you might say, something that Nikola Tesla discovered and was working on a long time ago, 100 years ago, okay? 120, 130, 140 years ago. Well, they've perfected it. And I've shown you, should be without a doubt, that there is obviously something seriously up with the earthquakes that are going on. And I'll make this prediction right now. And I don't like this prediction, but I'm making the prediction based on, I know the behavior of these people and how they operate. And I hope I'm wrong on this. But I would predict that there will be an 8.8 or a 9.1, one of the two, in California or off the coast of California in the very near future. I don't know what date, but 8.8 or 9.1, possibly 9.2 in the very near future. And it's going to be mass devastation, especially if it strikes off of the coast. And it's going to strike wherever they choose for it to strike. San Francisco would be a major target. Anywhere where there is a weak point in the, like a fault line, anywhere where there's a fault line, they can create probably as massive of an earthquake as they want to. And if it's somewhere where there's not a fault line, they can probably still create massive earthquakes, but maybe not as big. And I don't know exactly all the tools that come into play to create this, but I'm going to try to explain the basic dynamics to you. Okay, it's very similar. See, Tesla invented the radar as well. And the basic dynamics and this isn't necessarily how radar works, but the dynamics of what they're doing is they're using the ground as part of a two-part circuit, positive and negative side of a circuit. They're using the atmosphere as one pathway, and they're using the ground, particularly at the water table or below, in order to force the flow of electrons. And when you can create an earthquake doing this, it also gives you ability to do a number of other things as well. Now see, there's a reason why all this kind of kicked off on the 4th of July. Some of you may know and be familiar with this figure. Now, do you see anything in this image that reminds you of an image I showed you when the video first started? Remember the little earthquake icon that they were using to mark the earthquakes? The little diamond. Well, if you're familiar with this animated video that was put out back in 2012, I believe it was, there's a point in the video called I Pet Goat, which just happens to be the same book that Bush was reading, so it was called Pet Goat, in the classroom when he was notified that the towers were being dustified. Dustified, that's an interesting word. We'll come back to that. But in the video, this guy here is stomping around, stamping his feet, and there are earthquakes happening. And this is where he jumps up in the air and the lights come on. And then another big earthquake happens. This one that happens will be the 8.8 or 9.1 or 2. And it's coming. And that will be the birth. Now, some of you don't know what I'm talking about, and that's okay. But pay attention, though, that I showed you the 6.2s. How that, and you can double check my work. I encourage you to. Now I'm going to show you something else. You see this snowstorm? Well, this ain't a snowstorm. It's in the Netflix television show called Stranger Things. And I know it's strange that I'm talking about these things, but most of my viewers get what I'm talking about and why I'm showing them this. But in Stranger Things, in the upside down world, it snows, but it's not snow. Do you remember any place else that it snowed, but it didn't look like it, but it wasn't snow? Looked like snow, but was not snow. How'd that get in there? That's the dustification I'm talking about. How'd that get in there? That's Paradise, California. Well, that's just smoke. Is it? Why'd everything turn to dust? The forest didn't burn, but the houses did. Anything that had a lightning rod that went down into the ground strangely burned from the inside out. It's a very strange thing. As a matter of fact, if you'll pay close attention to what they've been saying about these earthquakes that have been happening recently, is that there have been a lot of fires where these earthquakes, the epicenters are, is that a lot of places are catching on fire. Like here's a few places that burned down. The earthquakes are causing fire. What it is that they pump so much juice into the earth, and depending on how much juice and at what frequency that they're using, is that they can cause it to burn everything up that's on the ground surface, especially if it has a lightning rod or a real good root system like a tree or a light pole that has the lightning rod on it that goes down beside it. You see, that's why all the light poles burn off at the ground in paradise. And that's why all the houses burnt from the inside out in paradise. Not just in paradise, other places where they've done the same thing. It's just a matter of tuning the frequency and the voltage, you might say. And if they can pump this much electricity into the earth and create earthquakes, if they flip the circuit and focus the electricity, the energy into the atmosphere, what do you think would happen? You ever see the movie Day After Tomorrow? It's coming. Oh, it's coming. What's coming? Well, there's a storm coming.